How long has it been since part 2? A month? Yeah, that sounds about right. Sorry for the massive delay, guys. I've just been a little busy. I'm not going to reveal anything now, other than saying next month, shit's gonna go down. Here's a link to part 1, here's a link to part 2, and here is part 3. Just roll the video. Roll the video.
When I first drafted this list about a couple of months ago, I looked back upon my entries and thought that they were pretty boring. You had your Marios and your Mega Mans and all the big names in between, but the original list was just a little too dull. So I delayed the countdown so that I could play some of the more obscure NES games, and the list changed dramatically. I found out that Super C and Bomberman 2 were better than both of their predecessors, and I discovered most of the more obscure entries on the list. Mother, Monster Party, and Bionic Commando for examples. I'm not going to act like I've played every NES game out there, and the list would still probably be quite different if I had, but I'm only bringing this up now because of the game that really surprised me with its quality, mainly because I'd never even heard of it before. Journey to Silius. Okay, it was a lie that I knew nothing about this game before playing it. I'd heard of its legendary soundtrack from PVG and the like. Journey to Silius is a combination game. By this I mean that none of its ideas or concepts were really its own, and that it more or less existed as a combination of other NES games. The controls of Castlevania, the level design of Mega Man, the graphical tone of Ninja Gaiden, with a more sci-fi atmosphere of course, the weapons and boss fights of Contra, and a soundtrack that's the best of all four. Seriously though, this soundtrack is bitchin'. Just give it a listen. Pair that with its dark, spacey tone, and you've got one hell of an atmosphere. The gameplay is your typical run and gun affair, unremarkable but functional. You gun down the enemies and you run to the right, to Silius probably. I don't know, as we discovered in my F-Zero countdown, I really don't have a clue what I'm talking about. Each level is topped off by a boss fight, which are pretty fun. The game's fairly varied with multiple guns to use, all with one combined ammo source. How does that even work? The game isn't the longest or the most original, but it's hell as fun to play. I'd recommend this game to any fans of platformers, the NES, or just great games in general. The Kid Icarus series is one that I want to see more of. The concept is just awesome. A third-person shooter platformer where you play as a lone angel and have to prove yourself fighting for the angels against an army of various gods of Greek mythology with interesting characters, funny dialogue, and more polish than you can shake a stick at. Of course, saying this I'm mainly referring to Kid Icarus Uprising, as that is one of my favourite games of all ever, but still, a lot of the greatness of that gem can be found in the NES original, Kid Icarus. Any fans of Uprising, so anyone who's played Uprising, as I don't know if I've mentioned this, but that game is fucking incredible, will probably love this game too. Kid Icarus is, you guessed it, another great NES platformer. You control Pit, which is a fitting name seeing though how pitiful his abilities are, especially for a frickin' angel. He can't fly, he can't shoot further than a few meters, his arrow power is terrible, and he can't fall further than the boundaries of the screen after scrolling, or at least he can't do any of these things without power-ups. Seeing Pit transform from crappy foot soldier into the ultimate angel of death as he is in the final level is pretty satisfying, and it constantly makes you want to push yourself in every level. If you go through each level avoiding all the enemies, not getting many points and not collecting any of the power-ups through the doors of each level, then you're likely going to get your ass handed to you. But if you collect all the power-ups and kill all the enemies, which will make the first few stages incredibly difficult, then the later stages and the much harder maze-like Zelda-esque stages will be a breeze. You essentially control the difficulty, which I like. The design of each level is split between vertical stages, horizontal stages, and maze-like labyrinth stages. The horizontal stages are by far the easiest. You can see where you're going pretty easily, you have a lot of space to move, and there aren't too many pits. These stages make up the second wall of the game, despite, as I say, being the easiest. The vertical stages are split between the Underworld, World 1, and the Sky World, World 3. They're much harder because once you scroll up, you can't scroll back down, and so the parameters of the screen become pits. The maze levels are by far the hardest, for the sheer amount of enemies they throw at you, and how easy it is to get lost. However, with a good sense of direction and sharp enough reflexes, they're alright. The final thing to set Kid Icarus apart is its theming. Its levels, bosses, characters, and stages are all based off Greek mythology. Sort of. It does take a lot of creative liberties, but it's nice to see every now and then a reference or two. Oh look, it's Medusa, the face on the wall that shoots snakes. I kind of feel like I should have been turned to stone at this point. Hercules, this ain't. Kid Icarus is yet another classic NES platformer, this time with decent levels of risk-reward system system is in its level design, varied level structures, and a pretty unique concept. Well worth the purchase, and if you've got a 3DS, there's a 3D version of the game with remade graphics and save features that's pretty awesome too. It's not like there's any better Kid Icarus games on the 3DS. Oh no, wait, that was that other one, wasn't there?
Ninja Gaiden 3 is easily the hardest game on this list. Ninja Gaidens 1 and 2 are probably the second and third hardest games on this list. Newsflash, Ninja Gaiden games, pretty fucking hard. But Ninja Gaiden 3 is just disgustingly brutal, and I love it. But you may be asking, why is he using it as a fucking stupid? But you may also be asking, how is Ninja Gaiden 3 so much more difficult? And that I can tell you. Enemies do far more damage in this game than they did in any of the other Gaidens, especially 1. On top of that, there are now more enemies that take more hits to kill, and more enemies as a whole. On top of that, fallback distance is the same, and there are just as many pits. On top of that, there are now rails and various other smaller platforms that you will often have to go on, and that will always make you incredibly vulnerable. And on top of that, there is now a limited amount of continues. But I wouldn't make a top NES list if I didn't like my fair share of challenge, and the difficulty in Ninja Gaiden 3 is shockingly fair, except for the limited continues. That's total bullshit. No, wait, scrap that. When you die, it always feels like it was your fault that you died. As it should, really. There's little to no cheap death pits, and the bosses are all pretty fair, and the level design has just the right amount of gimmicks to support a fair and just difficulty progression. I just wonder why it took them till the third installment to reach that, but hey. Though that isn't why The Ancient Ship of Doom is my favourite of the franchise, no, it's all in the presentation. Graphics and level design are top notch, with just enough gimmicks to keep things fresh and visually interesting. The soundtrack is also great, not quite as good as that of 1, but I would say that it fits the mood better. The storytelling and cutscenes of the series are back in full force with a much better storyline that seem to have more memorable moments and mystery in general. Like the fake Ryu killing Irene, and that constipation face. The only reason this game isn't higher is because of something I've been trying not to say on any entry, as it would label me as a noob to the hardcore crowd. This game is too hard. Really, I've got nothing to complain about. The difficulty is fair, I'll give it that, but when most of my gameplay boils down to the fallback after getting hit, it's a little too overwhelming. For any sadists out there, pick this one up. It's incredibly well made, enjoyable, and an all-around great game. Just expect to be put through hell and back before the final boss. I've always thought that gamers often complain too much about games being too short or too linear, although it's not like the industry is in any shortage of 40-hour open-world adventures, but I always thought that length and linearity were more design choices instead of actual flaws. Because if enough thought, awesome ideas and creativity is put in, a short, linear game can definitely be worth your time. Just look at Castlevania 1. Castlevania is a platform with its lore ripped straight from the horror stories of old, and a very deep focus on players taking time to assess their environments before progressing. The game's 6 stages will hardly take you very long to complete, but that short experience will be enjoyable enough to warrant at least a few revisits. The linear nature of the game means that developers will have planned out how to best conquer every situation, and they will have planned the enemy and weapon placements accordingly, with regards to how the levels are structured and how you control. I don't want to dwell too much on control because it has been talked about a lot. It's restrictive, it's uncomfortably rigid, but it's probably meant to be like that, as it adds to the slower pace of the game, and the level design is all made around your controls and your inabilities. Because the game is so well thought out, there will always be a sub-weapon nearby to deal with each situation, and you will always be able to work out which is the best way to deal with each enemy. All this also means that the game can have a very standardized level of difficulty throughout that constantly keeps you on your toes, but at no point feels too taxing or overwhelming. Unlike Castlevania 3, there is a standardized level of difficulty throughout, and there aren't any single difficult areas. Except for, you know, that hallway. Each level of Castlevania is like an endurance test, where if you try and rush through without thinking, you'll pay for it. But if you play the game as it's meant to be played, and in the meantime take in all the atmospheric details, it won't be too tough. The presentation is well themed around one premise. You're a vampire killer, you're in Dracula's castle, and you have to kill every horror-themed baddie of the last couple centuries of culture. And as it turns out, Dracula's a lot higher on the food chain than you might expect. Medusa, you know, the main villain of Kid Icarus, takes orders from Dracula. Frankenstein and various mummified corpses, yeah, they're all part of Drac's 3-year contract. Heck, he even made Death himself his bitch. It's like, could this guy be any more badass? Probably if he didn't get owned so many times. The colour scheme filled with contrasting blues and oranges lends itself to the game's tone well, and the music fits perfectly. That and the restrictive nature of the gameplay gives the game a bit of a horror vibe. It's a horror game before horror games were a thing. Also, can I just mention, Simon Belmont whips people to death as his primary attack. That's awesome. Castlevania is by every possible definition a classic, and it's one such game to prove that quality can triumph over quantity, if enough effort, great design, and solid mechanics are thrown in.
And now we have my favourite non-platformer on the list. Oh, there I go, spoiling the countdown again. Punch-Out! Oh, I'm sorry, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Don't want any of that Mr. Dream bullshit. I think it's funny for how brutish boxing is sometimes represented in media and just how mathematically Punch-Out treats the sport. As a boxer half the size of most of his opponents, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all. As such a small boxer, you can't win any matches through sheer strength or ability to take hits. You have to work out your opponent, get into their mind, predict their every move, and strike only when they're at their weakest to make the hunter into the hunted. This is by far the coolest thing about Punch-Out. You very much feel like the underdog as the slower, smaller, and weaker participant, and it makes every victory into its own achievement because it feels like you won it against the odds. A feeling that would only be belittled if the game was too easy. Thankfully, there's no worry of that. After the admittedly pathetic fight with Glass Joe, every fight will test your reflexes and memory as you work out each pattern and use it to your path to glory. The difficulty makes every fight feel even more satisfying, and when I beat this game, I felt on top of the world. Oh yeah, I've beaten this game. I'm kind of a badass. Another thing that would lose the immersion factor of the game is control, but again, it's so good that it only strengthens it. You control your blocks, your punches, your height of your punches, and when you use your specials. And it feels good. Then there's the music. Pure 8-bit awesomeness incarnate. It's a very small soundtrack with only 2 memorable songs, but seeing as how both of those songs are 2 of the best and most iconic of the NES's library, I think it can be forgiven. They both add to the intense drama of the situation and are pretty head-banging songs to boot. Punch-Out is a game that works. It works because all the assets work in accordance with each other and they make the final product far more than the sum of its parts. The epic music, the smooth controls, the perfect difficulty, and the satisfying feeling of being the underdog who rises to the top and takes out the king all accumulate and create one of the NES's finest games.
Mega Man 1 was a fairly solid start to the series, with many cool ideas, but in my opinion just a few too many flaws holding it back. Mega Man 2 was much better, with far more interesting concepts in the Robot Master's weapons and music, but again there are too many hiccups for me to call it one of the Blue Bomber's best. Mega Man 3 takes the series, shakes it off for impurities, perfects all the mechanics with various new additions such as the slide and rush, and presents the most varied and interesting set of levels, Robot Masters, and weapons seen in the series yet. And some people say that 2 is better? Before discussing content, let's just roll through some of Mega Man 3's many additions to the series. We got Rush, the game-breaking dog. Because what's a hero without their pet companion? Tintin's got Snowy, Mario's got Luigi, and Samus had that Metroid that one time. Rush can be used in 3 different modes. Rush Coil, that lets you jump on him to reach new heights. Rush Jet, where you can fly around at will. And Rush Marine, that is the same thing, but underwater. Mega Man now has a slide move too. It fixes a few problems I had with the first few games by increasing your maneuverability greatly. Sliding is great for avoiding enemy attacks, bypassing enemies, and completely changes the way you face Robot Masters. He is still a jump and shoot man, but with the aid of down and A, he was so much more. Mega Man 3 also introduced Proto Man. He doesn't really do much though. He jumps, he shoots, he conquers, but mostly he just jumps and shoots and acts like a bit of an annoying dick about it. Mega Man 3 is where Capcom were running out of ideas in the Robot Master department, which sounds like a bad thing, but it's actually one of the game's best assets. All the generic concepts like fire, ice, and bubble had gone at this point, so the team could come up with far more creative concepts for the Robot Masters that led to some of the best ones to date, such as Snake Man, Gemini Man, Shadow Man, and Magnet Man. A level based around magnets that can pick you up is always going to be more interesting than a water level, because you gotta have a water level. As I've said, the Robot Masters generally determine the quality of the Mega Man game in question because they encompass visual design, theming, music, weapons, bosses, and level design for most of the game. And to say that these Robot Masters are some of my favourites automatically puts this game on the good side of the franchise, far away from X6 and Mega Man for DOS. Yeah, Yeah, that's a game. I also have to give credit to the Doc Robot stages that I actually liked a lot more than most people. The levels were different enough to warrant playing through them again, and the fights against Doc Robots were pretty fun. Mega Man 3 kicks ass. It's where the series starts coming into its own in terms of quality thanks to numerous improvements and additions. It's also where the characters and world are given some much needed expansion. The Robot Masters, their levels, the soundtrack, I didn't mention it, but it's a Mega Man game so we can assume that it's pretty sweet. And the bosses make Mega Man 3 the game that it is. My 5th favourite NES game ever made. The Legend of Zelda will not be making an appearance today. This may surprise some of you, especially if I told you that Zelda is by and far my favourite franchise of all time. But truth be told, I find the original game in the series to be incredibly overrated. It's always seen as being one of the best Zelda games and overshadows a lot of the more underrated entries to the series, such as Spirit Tracks and Link's Awakening. But its biggest crime by far is overshadowing its far superior sequel, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. Okay, I get it. Believe me, I get it. Loads of people like Zelda 2, they like the gameplay and they like the exploration, and they wanted more of the same so that when Zelda 2 came out they were disappointed with how different it is. I get it. But just look at it by its own merits, go out of your comfort zone and appreciate the game for what it really is, and maybe, just maybe, you'll see something truly special in it. Many fans of the series say that this game doesn't feel like a Zelda game, that it should have been released as a standalone game as opposed to just trying to ride off the success of the original. But honestly, while the gameplay is very different to the Zelda norm, 2D or 3D, in terms of style, tone and feel, I'd say it felt far more similar to the more modern Zelda games because of additions like towns and magic that just seem like the Zelda norm now. But the big thing that makes the game so loved and hated is the gameplay. It's 2D and shit. Zelda 2's gameplay was very unique for its time. It was a combination of an RPG, a 2D platformer, and some elements of fighting games. You gain XP from killing enemies, which helps you level up, where you can choose to upgrade your health, your magic, or your sword power. While leveling up is important, defeating enemies is more about your own skill than anything, so grinding often won't get you very far. Combat is almost entirely swordplay, which is where the game starts to shine for me. Link is comprised of 2 blocks, from which you can attack and from which you can defend. The skill lies in positioning your shield to block enemy attacks and positioning your sword to puncture through enemy defenses. It's a far more fluid system than Zelda 1's clunky combat. I actually have a lot more to say about Zelda 2, and specifically why I think it's an improvement over the original, and I will dedicate an episode of Game Talk to analysing the 2, but for now I'll just say that if you passed on Zelda 2 at first because it was too different, give it a shot. I'm sure happy that I did. Super Mario Bros. 3. I've talked a little bit about nostalgia throughout this list, with a mention going to Mario 1, but this one I just have so many fond memories of. Or more, I have fond memories with the GBA port, which is in itself a port of the SNES port, but the NES version still brings all those memories back. Thinking I'd beaten the game and realising there were 7 whole more worlds to explore, dying repeatedly at that level with the stupid-ass Big Bertha, and killing Bowser for the first time after multiple attempts and feeling like a total badass. I was like 6, okay? Super Mario Bros. 3 is respected as one of the best sequels of all time for multiple reasons. Every great aspect of Super Mario Bros., the exploration, the music, the sprite work, the level design, the power-ups, were all expanded and enriched. The attention to detail is just astounding. The original had some pretty sweet level design and theming to make everything seem grander, which was pretty unique for its time, but Mario 3 takes it so much further with its 8 worlds, each with unique themes, and each with multiple interesting and memorable levels within it. Just think New Super Mario Bros., but about 20 years less stale. The levels are so memorable, in fact, that if I were to say Angry Sun, Tank Barrage, or Karibo's Shoe, you'd instantly know which stage I was referring to. And mentioning the Karibo's Shoe allows me to oh so smoothly segue onto the next greatest aspect of Mario 3, the power-ups. Newer Mario games are getting a little lazy with the power-up additions. Now have him throw a slightly different shaped projectile, throw in the one from the old game, and perfect! But Super Mario Bros. 3 is a completely different story. On top of mushrooms, starmen, and fire flowers, it introduced the raccoon suit, the tanuki suit, the frog suit, the P-wing, Karibo's Shoe, the flute, and my personal favourite, the Hammer Bros. Suit. The Hammer Bros. Suit wrecks so much shit up that losing it is physically painful. The presentation is one thing that, surprisingly, I feel the NES version of the game did a better job at than the 16-bit versions. The colours work, the music's decent, albeit not that catchy, and the sprite work is legendary for NES standards. I would say better than Mario 1, but you know, dat Mario sprite. Many of you may be surprised that this is not number 1, but believe me, it was going to be, and I'm pretty confident with the decision I made to change that, and then change it again to number 3. But Mario 3 deserves every compliment and bit of praise that it gets, for some nostalgic, but mainly purely technical reasons. It proudly holds the place on my shelf as being my 3rd favourite 2D Mario platformer. God, I shouldn't have said that, I hope nobody heard. On to the next entry, quick, on to the next entry! If Zelda was my favourite video game franchise of all time, then my second favourite would be none other than the Kirby franchise. It might not be difficult, it might not be complex, and it might not even be that engaging, but it's a series I'm very fond of for how relaxing, peaceful, and enjoyable it is, as you constantly find new ways to dismember your foes. Kirby is a bastard. The series started off with Kirby's Dream Land, but it took until Kirby's Adventure for the series to really take off, thanks to copy abilities, among other things. Also Meta Knight. Whoa, Meta Knight! Etc, etc. The NES has no shortage of insanely tough games, so it's nice to see one that's not afraid of not challenging players at all, and instead providing just an awesome, fun time. Playing Kirby's Adventure is like a complex form of meditation. Something about the colourful visuals, something about the music so catchy and happy it's engraved into my mind forever, or maybe it's something about how the game practically defines nostalgia for me, as practically all of Kirby's games do. It's the first series I would have called myself a fan of. Kirby's Adventure was the first game to form the DNA of Kirby. The DNA which, apart from a few notable exceptions, hasn't really changed since. And Kirby Triple Deluxe doesn't look to change that. Possibly the coolest thing about Kirby is the copy abilities. You see an enemy do a thing, you inhale him, and you do the thing. This opens up a vast amount of opportunities for mixing up the gameplay whenever it starts to feel samey. The gameplay changes at your own pace, whenever you feel like changing it. And the game's so easy that you are free to have any of the crappy abilities if you just want to piss about at a time. You want to be a tornado? You want to be a UFO? You want to be a ball? Fuck yeah! The enemies aren't really there to put up a fight, they're just there for you to toy and experiment with, as you find various ways to plow through them at speed. Kirby is a bastard. The other strand, yeah, I'm going with strand, of the Kirby DNA is the intense happiness. The cheerful visuals, the sickly sweet music, and the really cartoonish nature of everything that can put you in a good mood within minutes. Not to mention just how satisfying ripping apart all the enemies is. Kirby is a bastard. For an NES game, despite how late it was released, this game has an incredible amount of content. A full overworld that takes you between each level, mini-games, a boss rush mode, not to mention the 24 different copy abilities you can get, and each boss being really fun and creative, and you've got a game that will keep you entertained for a while. There's something to be said for a game that respects itself as an art form, or a grueling challenge, but Kirby's Adventure is just pure, unrefined fun, and that's why I love it. Now for a quick recap. By the way, in future I'll only be recapping the multi-part lists. Number 30, Ice Hockey. Number 29, Bubble Bobble. Number 28, Super Mario Bros. 2. Number 27, Monster Party. Number 26, Bomberman 2. Number 25, Final Fantasy. Number 24, Excite Bike. Number 23, Mega Man. Number 22, Ninja Gaiden 2. Number 21, Batman. Number 20, Mega Man 4. Number 19, Bionic Commando. Number 18, DuckTales. Number 17, Mother. Number 16, Mega Man 2. Number 15, Super C. Number 14, Super Mario Bros. Number 13, Ninja Gaiden. Number 12, Castlevania 3. Number 11, Mega Man 5. Number 10, Journey to Silius. Number 9, Kid Icarus. Number 8, Ninja Gaiden 3. Number 7, Castlevania. Number 6, Punch-Out. Number 5, Mega Man 3. Number 4, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. Number 3, Super Mario Bros. 3. And number 2, Kirby's Adventure. I went there. In my Mega Man 5 segment of the last part, I talked about how it got a lot of hate, and why I thought that it didn't deserve it. But none of that even comes close to how much hate this game gets, and I have no idea why. Especially since this game is borderline perfect. The big gimmick with Mega Man 6, at least with regards to the Robot Masters, was the World Tour theme. Each Robot Master on their stage are based off a certain theme of a certain country. This idea birthed some of my all-time favourite Robot Masters, like Tomahawk Man and Sentio Man. Their fights were also pretty sweet, containing the simple patterns that make each boss so satisfying to take down. But the World Tour theme really only comes into play with regards to the levels. Instead of travelling across generic forest, generic rock, and generic guts, I guess, How about a Middle Eastern palace turned into an oil refinery that can be set alight? Or the ruins of the lost city of Atlantis amidst a naval expedition to explore it? Or even a roboticized version of the Amazon jungle? The Mega Man series has always been about the clash between nature and technology, and these levels show it off the best, and they do so gloriously. It's not just the theming that makes every level fun to traverse across either. Most levels have multiple hazards and combinations of said hazards to make them really memorable. Upside down underwater segment, anyone? Just how many laws of physics is he breaking here anyway? Also, for the first time in forever, the end levels, those of Mr. X occurring after the Robot Masters, actually feel like they've had some time and effort put into them. Wait, who's Mr. X? The plot and characters of Mega Man 6 is my favourite in the classic series, primarily for how it fits into and relates with the plots of the other games. Put it into perspective, let's recap the plot of the last 5 Mega Man games. Oh no, Wily's turned some robots evil and we have to stop him. Oh no, Wily's turned some more robots evil. Again? Seriously? Oh darn, that Wily's at it again. Dr. Cossack is evil robots too? Oh no way, it's just Wily. Proto Man? Nah, just Wily. But for this, the 6th installment, Capcom decided to delve into a far deeper storyline, with a better developed and more complex antagonist that really brings the Mega Man universe to a deeper and more human level. Nah, just kidding, it's Wily. The plot of Mega Man 6 is so stupid that it acts as a parody of the previous Mega Man plots, and I love it. The disguise isn't even very good, and what kind of a fake name is Mr. X? I'd worked out who the main villain was almost as quickly as playing Wily's Revenge, and that one, I mean, it's pretty obvious really. With my joint favourite soundtrack on the NES, with Mega Man 2, and some of the console's most pleasing graphics, I'd say the presentation also gets a big tick in the #1 NES games checklist. I don't even have anything to say, it's just good and stuff. Now let's just listen to the incredible Wingman's theme and be done with it. Even with the unparalleled storytelling, amazing level design and fun bosses with incredible visual and auditory design in effects, music and sprites, we still haven't touched my favourite part of the game, the replay value. The weapons aren't a necessity for a Mega Man game being good, but when they're as good as they are in Mega Man 6, it adds a lot to the overall package. The weapons you use don't depend on which one is horribly broken or which one is immune/weak to which one or whatever. In this game, each weapon has a purpose, and each one is just as convenient at a different point. What's more, it's entirely possible to play through the game with just your Mega Buster or just any of the Robot Master weapons, because there are no immunities, which were total bullshit by the way, and the game is fairly easy. And more than just being a new weapon or a vehicle, Rush now gives you 2 completely different playstyles thanks to his new adapters that both rock. Power and Jet. Power replaces ranged attacks and reduced maneuverability for extra power and the ability to break shields, and Jet trades the ability to slide or charge buster shots for the ability to hover briefly. These 2 upgrades are so balanced and versatile that you can very easily have the entire playthrough with just one adapter. In fact, go check out Dookie Jed's channel, he's doing a Mega Man 6 playthrough doing just that. Have I been rambling for that long? Time to wrap things up. Mega Man 6 is awesome and achieves what most sequels only strive for. Instead of churning out more of the same, Capcom mixed up the Robot Masters to fit in with the World Tour theme, improved the power-ups a bajillionth-fold, and provided just as good a soundtrack, sprite work, boss battles and control as ever before. Mega Man 6 stands tall as both my NES and classic Mega Man game of choice. But enough about me, what are your favourite NES games? Do you agree with mine? Probably not, my opinions are weird and uncommon. Would your list have included Zelda 1 or Metroid? And what is the best Mega Man game of all? Leave me a comment, I love to read them. That was part 3, I hope you enjoyed it. As I said, I've got some pretty crazy shit planned for April, so just watch this place if you know what I'm saying. Once again, thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to like, favourite, comment and subscribe. I'm Mr. 12603, and if there was ever any doubt that NES Remix 2 is going to be a bajillion times better than the original, just look at the positions on this list.